What if Drake is right? I've not heard anyone across socials, any content creators, really explore the possibility that Drake is right. Right about what? Right about Kendrick Lamar, right about UMG, right about the music industry, right? Let's start with Kendrick Lamar. What if Drake is right about Kendrick Lamar? So a few years back, I developed something I call the bias test, right? I call it test number one. And test number one is the bias test. When you're debating with someone about something that has sort of two opposing sides to it, to check your own biases, you need a way to sort of make sure that you're not maybe arguing something from a biased standpoint or biased perspective. And so we were debating the Jordan LeBron GOAT debate, right? As we do. And so using that as an example, what the bias test is what you have to do to conduct the bias test is to switch the resumes of the two sides of the thing that you're debating. So using Jordan and LeBron, it's quite simple. Now LeBron is 6-0 in the finals, and Jordan is 4-6 in the finals, and LeBron is averages 30.1 points a game, and Jordan averages 27 points a game, and so on. Now, even though you're going to switch the resumes of the two things that you're debating, what you're going to keep intact is how they did it. Meaning, Jordan still, shoots fadeaway jumpers, and when he drives to the rim, sticks his tongue out. And LeBron is still a freight train, that can't be stopped when he goes to the rim and he shoots threes and mid-range and whatever, right? So the style in which they did it is the same, but their resumes, the outcome of the way they went about it or did it, is what you're switching, right? Okay, let's take that same bias test and apply it to Drake and Kendrick, right? And specifically apply it to their history. Because I believe that for many of us that have debated about this over the past year with Drake and Kendrick and UMG's involvement and the whole thing, a lot of what blocks many of you from seeing this thing in a different perspective is your inherent bias against Drake, but also against what Drake represents to you, right? Which is like this harbinger for this new music industry and this new style of the hip hop superstar, right? Drake is the first hip hop superstar that is, a singer and as well, and he does all these other things, and he can do all these other styles musically, legitimately, and be good at it. But he is the top hip hop star as well, and that bothers many of you, right? For all kinds of stupid reasons. And the fact that he's Canadian doesn't help either, right? If Drake was from the Bronx doing the exact same music, you all would love him. You'd love him, right? But because he was born, across the river, right? From the New York state line, all of a sudden he's a foreigner, right? Anyway, let's apply the bias test. So Drake and Kendrick have been in the public's eye for the better part of 15 years. Well, more than that in Drake's case. And so remember, early on in Kendrick's career, Drake was extremely helpful. And that's the understatement of the year. I believe that Drake gave Kendrick the greatest cosign, the greatest runway, right, for an artist career that, from another artist that's not affiliated with Kendrick's label, that wasn't affiliated with any of the people that ran the label that Kendrick was on. Like in other words, a dude that didn't get anything out of it other than looking out for another artist. And don't get me wrong, Kendrick was amazing. He is an amazing artist, and he was amazing back then, but Drake didn't get any personal gain from it. It wasn't like Kendrick was Drake's artist or something, right? Okay. So Drake puts Kendrick, on Take Care, right? Gives Kendrick, literally a song on Take Care, which up until that point was Drake's most critically acclaimed album. Kendrick kills it, absolutely. Drake then takes Kendrick and others on his first world tour, puts more money in Kendrick's pocket from shows than he had seen up until that point. Those are not my words. You can take Kendrick's words for that. You can even take indirectly what DJ Head talked about several days back when he was reminiscing at a recent show where he went to see Kendrick, about how Kendrick used to make $500 a show, right? And go back and look at the time frame that he's talking about and match that up to the time frame that Kendrick goes on the Club Paradise tour with Drake. And he goes from $500 to hundreds of thousands of dollars overnight. And that's thanks to Drake. Well, immediately after that, Drake then hops on Good Kid, Mad City, right? And in doing that, Drake is he's the only major rapper that's a non-TDE artist on that album. I could say the only major artist, but Mary J. Blige was on that album, whatever. Now, Drake is on Poetic Justice, which for many years after Good Kid, Mad City comes out, which, remember, that album goes on to be the longest charted hip hop album in history, okay? And for good reason. It's an amazing album. But Drake is on Poetic Justice, and that was the that was the most popular single for years and years after that. I think it's since been surpassed, by Swimming Pools, or I don't know what, it was by another song, right? Now, Drake, in hopping on Good Kid, Mad City, say whatever you want about this, helped the popularity of that album, which helped Kendrick, and it helped to give him that amazing start to his career that I was referring to. I know that wasn't his first album, but it was his first album on a major. And if you think that him being on Take Care and going on the Club Paradise tour did not help him get his first major deal to make Good Kid, Mad City, you're crazy and you're naive, or you're just a hater. Now, let's pause here a second. If Kendrick had done any of those things, much less all of them, for Drake at the start of his career, there wouldn't be a 24-hour day where someone wasn't mentioning that online and telling Drake fans to shut up and sit down. But we never tell Kendrick stans this. We never say to Kendrick stans, hey, yo, like, what are we talking about here? Look at what Drake did for this man's career, right? We never talk about this as if Drake owed him this, or as if he was doing Drake a favor. Like I'm not saying that Drake working with Kendrick and doing those things for him didn't help Drake at all. I'm not saying that, because that's not true. But Drake was looking out. Had Drake done the same exact things for any other artist, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But because it was for Kendrick, we have to come up with all these other ancillary reasons now. Nope. Drake was a good dude then. He's a good dude now. But because you need to see him a certain way, you can't give him credit for doing that solid all those years ago. Let's keep going. So after that, Kendrick does the control verse on Big Sean's album. That verse, that song comes out a month and change before Drake's album comes out. Now, and this is very important. For some reason, everyone has gone with this dumb narrative back then on up until the present day that Drake is this sensitive, non-hip hop loving, person who doesn't deserve to have the crown in hip hop because he has never honored the true sentiments of what hip hop was sort of founded on, right? Which is complete nonsense. And one of their, one of the pillars of this dumb argument is how Drake conducted himself after the control verse dropped, right? Everyone loved the control verse. The control verse was so great. The control verse was okay. It certainly wasn't terrible, but the control verse wouldn't be a top 50 Kendrick Lamar verse. Kendrick's an amazing MC. I have my criticisms of him, but his rapping ability ain't one of them. He's filthy, and we all know it, right? But listen, let's be very clear about something. Kendrick hops on Big Sean's Control song. He raps the famous Control verse. He raps 64 bars on that verse, which is, first of all, rude. Every producer, sound engineer, and rapper knows that what I'm saying right now is true. It is rude. Who raps 64 bars on a song? I don't care if Big Sean raps 64 bars. You don't. Jay Electronica certainly didn't, right? But Big Sean, I guess was okay with it, so he did it. All right. In the verse, he talks about how he's the king of New York. He's the king of both coasts. I love all of you, but I'm trying to take all of your fans and murder you. Make it so that your fans never heard of you. Blah blah blah. Right? We all know the verse. Listen to me. Weeks later, when Drake's album drops, right? Which was Nothing Was the Same album, drops, and Drake is doing his album run, right? His press run for the album. He's visibly annoyed. Why? He's visibly annoyed because he's asked continuously about a goofball verse that we all know was meant to clout chase. Yeah, it was a good verse. No one's taking that from him. But you're not going to make this life-changing moment in hip hop because the verse was so good. No, the reason why you all loved it so much was because it did what y'all all love, which is brought back the WWE to hip hop, which you all love, which is gross. It's so lame, right? And here's why it's lame. Let's imagine, this is the bias test, if Drake had rapped the control verse. If Drake had rapped the control verse, you all would have been saying how lame that is. How dare this Canadian raps this incendiary verse saying all these things. He wants to murder these rappers and make sure that fans never heard of you. All of this, right? But I love y'all, but right? Every one of you would be saying, why doesn't this guy respect the culture? You all would be saying, why doesn't Drake remember Tupac and Biggie dying behind words, behind nonsense, behind words that weren't even real or true, right? We would be killing Drake. We would be saying all of these things about him, which he would have deserved. Yet Kendrick Lamar never received such a lecture. Never received it from one person back then on up until today. A few months later, actually, before we get to that, and after that, you think that Kendrick Lamar would have picked up the phone and said, Drake, for what it's worth, I ain't mean no harm by that verse, man. It's just rapping. It's just for the sport of it. Kendrick didn't do that. A few months later, after Drake's being visibly annoyed, right? Vibe magazine comes out. Drake says in the Vibe interview in the magazine, listen, yeah, I was annoyed, but I was annoyed essentially because I'm on an album run. I don't want to have to talk about this dumb verse, this clout chasing verse during my album run. Now, he didn't say this, but this sort of undergirded that statement, in my opinion. I just took this dude on tour not long ago, made him more money than he's ever made. I gave this man a song on my album, gave him this beautiful runway to help kick his career off. Then I hopped on Good Kid, Mad City and did Poetic Justice and killed it, and everything was great. Janet Jackson was considering being on the song. You think that she was considering being on the song because she loved Kendrick so much? Get out of here. She probably didn't even know who he was. He's amazing. I love Kendrick, but stop it. We all know her considering getting on Poetic Justice would have had way more to do with Drake than with Kendrick. Whether you like that fact or not, that's what it is. The only way I would not believe that is if Janet herself came out and said different. And even then, I might give it a side eye. But months later, the BET Cypher comes out. And rather than pick that phone up and call Drake and say, homie, I ain't mean nothing by that, blah, 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 he triples down on it. And that's where we get the famous, tucking the sensitive rapper back in his pajama clothes verse from, right? Okay. And from the BET Cypher until the First Person Shooter on For All the Dogs album, right? 10 years. We had 3 presidents in between the time that Kendrick in earnest gave the first shots, right? Even though he didn't say Drake's name, so whatever, but we knew who he was talking about, until First Person Shooter comes out. 10 years, nothing. Okay. Then Drake and Cole on First Person Shooter 10 years later, and Drake reaches out to Kendrick to be on First Person Shooter. Kendrick declines. Let's pause here a second. Bias test. In what world, if Drake were asked to be on a song with the other 2 members of the big 3, Cole and Kendrick, and if we found out that Drake declined, in what world would we be like, oh, he just didn't want to do it, maybe he had other things to do, or maybe no, we would say he's ducking those 2 guys. We would say Drake was afraid to have the worst verse on that song. He would be afraid that his big 3, his position in the big 3 would now be in question. Well, I'm doing the same exact thing with Kendrick. I'm asking those same questions. How in the world did we let that time come and go and no one asked that question? No one said, hey, what's up with Kendrick? He was asked to be on First Person Shooter with Drake and Cole. He talks all this stuff about how he wraps circles around them and there is no big 3, it's just big me. Okay, prove it. Prove it. Get on the song and show us. If Drake is number 3 in the big 3, prove it. Prove it. That's how you settle that. That's how you settle that. And there are no circumstances where had Drake done the same thing where we wouldn't have just written him off after that forever and ever. But somehow we turned that into a virtue with Kendrick. Somehow Someone waved a magic wand and said, oh, actually, Kendrick is above that. Those petty little... Really? All of a sudden, Kendrick's above it all. Okay, gotcha. We would have said, had Drake done the same thing, he's not of hip hop culture. I knew it. He doesn't know, he's not part of the culture. He's not hip hop. Yeah, he doesn't understand hip hop. He doesn't understand how this works. We would say, you know, Drake, some moments culturally are more important than your ego, Drake. Why? And not one of you said that to Kendrick. Not one of you. He can do whatever he wants to do. And not one of you questions it. Listen to me. Treating someone in that fashion only creates tyrants. It never ends differently. Only creates tyrants. Let's keep going. So, like I said, had this been Drake, we'd be asking, is Drake afraid of rapping next to Kendrick and Cole? But that was never asked when it came down to Kendrick. All right. Months later, Like That comes out, which was the first shot, right? It's the Confederates firing on Fort Sumter, right? And it's the first shot in earnest in this battle. Many of you have been going around the socials and the internet and saying it was every other thing except Like That. No, it was on Like That. You know, the song that was on the album titled We Don't Trust You, that came out 3 weeks before a second follow-up album titled We Still Don't Trust You, with a slew of features on both albums that are comprised of all the enemies of Drake. You mean to tell, and that took the better part of 2 years to record, and you mean to tell me when I look at you all and go, hey, I think there's collusion here, you all look me square in the eye and go, you're crazy. All right, okay. So then the battle starts in earnest. Now, other than Like That, Drake and Kendrick record a total of 8 songs. 4 songs for Drake, 4 songs for Kendrick, right? Now, of Kendrick's 4 diss songs going at Drake, remember, this does not include Like That, 3 of them came out on the same day. Did y'all know that? A bunch of y'all are gonna say, yeah, we follow this. Well, yeah. To yourself, be honest. Did you know that before I said it right now? I know you heard all the songs, you can rap all. Did you know that of the 4 diss tracks that Kendrick released in the entire beef, that 3 of the 4 songs came out in a 24-hour period? Why does he keep repeating that? Because it's unheard of. You know how hard it would be for you to record those songs, for them to be lyrically accurate, and to get the timing just right versus Drake's diss songs back at you. Unless you knew when Drake's songs were coming out. And unless you knew what Drake's songs were going to be about specifically. Let's keep going. Meet the Grams comes out a mere 52 minutes before Drake's best song, which is universally believed to be Family Matters. Again, unheard of. That's unheard of. This effectively steps on Drake's best effort in the battle and neutralizes it. And I believe it was the turning point of everything. I really do. And then several hours later, Kendrick's coup de grace, Not Like Us, comes out. It's his final song. It was his best song, obviously. Here's my question. How did he know where to stop and when to stop? How did Kendrick know when to stop? How did Kendrick know when to stop? Yeah, no one has an answer to that, so don't worry. Let's fast forward to the lawsuits. So Drake is suing UMG, not Kendrick Lamar, UMG, for causing irreparable harm to his career. Now, what I believe undergirds his lawsuit is that Kendrick Lamar and others colluded with UMG to basically death of auto-tune Drake's career. Now, I believe that there's already lots of circumstantial evidence to support this, and to support the fact that Kendrick Lamar 1,000% colluded with UMG to do this. Everything from like the timing of the diss tracks, and remember everyone unfollowed Drake on Twitter. Y'all remember that? I want to say late February, March, sometime last year that happened. And so I'm going to give you all an example of what I'm talking about with circumstantial evidence. This is a question that I want you all to kind of mull over in your heads. Kendrick Lamar, Ross, Future, Metro, and the others. I think it's undeniable at this point to say different, have irreparably changed Drake's career at this point. Drake's career will never be the same. I'm not saying he'll never, be popular. He'll never sell a ton of albums. He'll never tour and make millions and millions of dollars. That's not what I'm saying. But the cachet, Drake's cultural cachet, will probably never be quite the same again for, in a negative way. Here's the question. If what I'm saying about those artists colluding with UMG to irreparably harm Drake's career is nonsense, it's crazy talk, ask yourselves this question. Drake is one of the highest earning artists on UMG. He might be one of the 2 or 3 highest earning artists on UMG. And he's done it longer or as long as anybody. If what I'm saying is crazy, why isn't Kendrick Lamar and those other artists, why aren't they afraid of what UMG would do to them for irreparably harming Drake's career? These are UMG artists, right? It's nobody from Sony or Warner Brothers, right? And the answer to that question is they're not afraid of what UMG would do to them for irreparably harming Drake's career because they did what they were sent to do. What is there to be afraid of then, right? Now, remember last year in August when Drake releases the 100 Gigs project, right? I believe that that's part of Drake's legal strategy. He released it out of the blue. It was random, right? 3 songs and then a bunch of, video and stuff like that. I believe that he knew that UMG was going to force him to take that down, which they did, and he took it down within 24 hours. But what I believe Drake was trying to do was to establish basically, what happens when you don't clear songs and video through UMG first. And so it's like his way of saying, hey, UMG had all my diss songs, in advance when Kendrick and I were going back and forth, right? And they had to have them first because they wouldn't have cleared them because they would have made me yank them down had they not cleared them. So because they had my diss songs first, they were able to give them to Kendrick so that he could, plan and respond to them and effectively neutralize them based on the dates I was releasing them, dates and times I was releasing them. If you remember, part of Drake's winning strategy against Meek Mill had to do with when he released those diss songs. Now, despite this, Drake isn't suing Kendrick Lamar, even though there are fools on the internet right now still saying Drake is suing Kendrick. He's not suing Kendrick, he's suing UMG. And the suit alleges, and this is so important, no one talks about this. Part of his original filing has to do with UMG firing pro-Drake employees. People that they think are pro-Drake employees, all right? And so we forget that Drake had to move his family out of Canada because his house got shot up a day after Not Like Us came out. So like real lives have been affected by this. This has been a life and death thing. Well, how do we know that UMG had anything to do with the shooting, directly or indirectly? Well, we don't, but we do know this. And the suit alleges this as well, that from that day to this, UMG never contacted Drake or Drake's representatives to see if he was okay. For some time, they didn't know if Drake was shot and hit in that shooting. So this is not something, let's say it a different way. Do you think that if Celine Dion's house got shot up, that UMG wouldn't have been on the phone immediately checking on her? Well, Celine Dion isn't a rapper. Just because you're a rapper doesn't mean you're inherently violent. Drake isn't part of a gang. Drake doesn't have a violent past. He doesn't have one violent incident of note whatsoever. Tell me the story about that time that Drake punched some guy in the face because he was drunk at the club, or because Drake was on some pill or some drug where he beat up some guy. That has never happened. And so for your house to get shot up, for a bodyguard to get hit so badly that he had to be rushed to the hospital and spent several days there, and for your record label to not make one phone call, to not send one email, to not ask someone to make sure you're okay, it's ridiculous. It's outrageous. And it's more circumstantial evidence that they are behind, I think, all of it. But at a minimum, they're behind a large portion of this. Let's remember the bias test. Let's go back to that for a second. And let's switch these resumes, right? Again, we've allowed the Malcolm X of hip hop, which was Kendrick Lamar, to collude with a soulless, entity, a company, UMG, who's done an immense amount of harm, in my opinion, to hip hop and to hip hop artists in general. But to hip hop, overall, I should say. We've allowed someone that was regarded as, again, the Malcolm X of hip hop to collude with UMG and to convince us that, and by us, I'm talking about Black Americans, but I'm also talking about, hip hop fans of every race, creed, color, age, and so on, that one of our own is not like us. We've allowed that. We've sat here over the last year and we've allowed this nonsense to take place. And honestly, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of how we've conducted ourselves over the past year. Again, as Black people and as hip hop fans in general. And, again, we have to really ask ourselves, seriously, what if Drake is right?